All right, so Jason is going to be just a few minutes late. He was rushing back from a listing presentation, so he'll be on in just a few minutes. If you could tell me, what have you been seeing, or what questions do you have to start?
Well, obviously due to the low inventory, it's hard to even get into coming soons. By the time something's on coming soon and you try to book a showing, that's problem number one for price point under 3, especially in Washington County, what I'm dealing with. And then, just really poising our buyers to put together that awesome package. What does that look like?
Okay.
I would agree with Jackie there on that too, and probably trying to figure out how to talk to them before even going into these properties, telling them that they're probably going to be higher anyway. I mean, I'm scheduling showings like crazy for some buyers, and they go into them and they're like, they don't like it. They're like, it's probably not even going to sell for that price. I'm like, no, it's going to sell for over. And same with the ones they like, where we get 16 offers on them.
Good questions. What else do we have? I'm sending Jason these questions so that he can answer them as soon as he gets on.
Do you guys like escalation clauses on your listings?
We actually prefer to not have an escalation clause. We like to have them for our buyers, but not necessarily on our listings. It doesn't always work. It depends on the situation.
Okay, because yeah, I'd love to know how to write those better. I don't like them, but if we have to use them, we have to figure them out.
Well, and not all listing agents work with them, so they're uncomfortable with them. So you have to vet that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm sending these to Jason. Any other questions?
Luetta, are you looking at this from a buyer's perspective or a seller's perspective?
Oh,
Both? Okay. So I keep hearing, and I only had it happen at my one house, was that when these offers are coming in like 20,000 over, but they're actually playing a game, or 25,000 over with the appraisal and whatnot, if they're working on another house with investors, is that truly a trend?
Say that question again.
Yeah. So with investors that are looking to flip a house, if they're coming in like 25,000 higher than the asking price to try to like buy time on other houses, but they're winning out on the bid, and then all of a sudden it gets not appraised at that, so then they're out.
Well, just because it doesn't, yeah, just because it doesn't appraise that doesn't necessarily mean that they get an automatic out.
Oh no, but I'm hearing that they're playing this game so that they have an out while they're bidding on other houses as investors.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm just asking if that's like a trend or if that's normal.
Okay. All right, Jason is on.
Yeehaw. I'm just texting you. I'm voice texting you. This stupid thing won't work.
I didn't get your text yet, but I've sent you now the questions that they've had so far.
Right on. All right. Well, I will start with, is my video thing working?
Yes, we see you.
Right on. So how I started this morning when I did this in Stillwater was to basically, if you haven't gone on St. Paul Association of Realtors lately, go on there and click on weekly indicators. So click on the stats link and go to weekly indicators. So just a WI, it's like a big box. I could find it on my screen and show you guys right now. If anyone doesn't know how to get to it, raise your hand or let me know and we can go through that. Otherwise, make a point to get on SPAR's website today, look at the stats page, and then look at the numbers. The multiple offer situation is only going to get worse. So if you have buyers that are having challenges getting properties, getting into properties, winning in multiples, this is going to be what we're going to deal with for quite a while. We're down 20% in units right now. We're down 16% year to date. We're down 20% just since March. And we got more realtors, right? So it's ultra competitive right now. You're going to be asked to cut your commissions. You're going to be asked to, you're going to be losing out, right? You got buyers writing 4 and 5 offers. They still only go to 1 closing. So it's going to feel really busy. And the numbers are not lying. When you look at the numbers are down. The total available units are down. Total available closings are down. Pendings are down. Okay, this isn't to scare you. This is just to grab your attention to say you need to learn how to win in multiples, because every time you don't win, you're practicing. You do not get paid to practice. So if you don't intend on winning, then you have to know that your only alternative is to lose. And if you got your license to lose, this is a shitty career. So you're going to need to figure out how to win. So winning in multiples is why we're doing this class. And you really want to make sure that you are winning. Anyone got a buyer they've written like 4 offers for, and you're like, this week you're going to look at more houses, right? If you haven't had that person, you know, sometimes it takes them 3 or 4 times of getting kicked in the teeth before they listen. The thing that I do know, you know what, Luetta, I'm going to share the screen. Well, actually, you can just arrow down. Yeah, perfect. So it starts with the proper buyer consultation. So winning in multiple offers, and I'll look at your questions here in a second, but winning in multiple offers many times can be avoided, or it can be less stressful and have an easier time winning in multiples when you spend the time up front doing a proper buyer consultation. So letting them know that you know, sometimes we may get into multiple offers. You're looking in a really competitive price range. Many times we're seeing list price is really just like an opening bid, right? So when you say these types of things in your initial buyer consultation and you let them know, many times it's an opening bid. Sometimes there are properties that will go tens of thousands over asking price, and there will be lots of offers, and there will be several cash offers. So your chance of winning is very, very small if we write offers that are foolish or just they're not in your best interest. You know, if we ask for closing costs, we do things like that, that's going to set you up for failure. Now, if you say that at the time you're writing the offer, you seem like a sleazy salesperson trying to get them to, you know, basically pay more for the house so you make an easier sale for yourself. When you tell them from a consultative approach, you're letting them know that this could happen before it actually happens. You're actually a consultant. And now when it actually happens, it will be received a lot different than if you brought it up for the first time right when you're trying to get them to write an offer. And at that point, you're telling them they need to be 5,000 or 10,000 over asking price, but that's the first time you've ever said it. Or we shouldn't ask for closing costs, and that's the first time you've ever said it. Most of the time, the things that, you know, create problems in an offer are brought up the first time they write an offer. You know, like, we can ask for closing costs, but, you know, it just makes us a little bit less competitive. Well, let's just try it. Oh, okay. Well, welcome to offer number 7 and the houses that, you know, they can't. So now they get in this routine of telling you what they're going to offer, because we have a tough time telling them the truth up front. Tell them how it works, right? Tell them how it works. Their second place sucks. Okay. Second place sucks, right? The bride gets a white dress, everyone else gets the ugly bridesmaid dress, right? Like you don't want to be second in house shopping. Second in house shopping means you're going to spend the rest of your time looking, trying to find that one again. Let them know that up front, right? See, if your initial consultation prepares them for the problem, you'll have less problems. If your initial consultation lets them know, well, sometimes we have to write 5 or 6 offers. Oh, perfect. Well, you've created the problem you're going to endure. So if you like writing 5 offers and going to 1 closing, then let them know that that's kind of the path you usually take. And then what happens is the 5th and 6th offer they make are the ones you could have told them they would have had to make the first time. But you can't say that when they're writing the offer. That can't be the first time we ever bring it up. Okay? So tell them how it works. Tell them how winning works. Let them know many people might borrow from their 401k. They may borrow from their grandma. They write a cash offer. They're writing at $250. How do people have cash? Well, Uncle Tommy borrows them the money and then they get a mortgage the week after closing. Right? And so if you're writing in the 250 range, you know this, right? People are writing 250 cash offers. It's not like, little Tommy and Linda have 250 cash laying around for their first place, but they're borrowing it from their parents, their grandparents, their uncle, their cousin, the 401k, whatever, buying a house for cash and then mortgaging it afterwards so that they can stay competitive and beat everyone out. Okay, so ask for permission to be honest with them and let them know you won't always have the best news. I'm not here, I'm here to tell you the news. Sometimes I got bad news. But this is a buyer consultation, and so I want to let them know that I will always tell you the truth. I just always won't have good news. In multiple offers, there can only be one winner. Do you want to win? Sometimes they're not motivated. I had a coaching call with one of my agents this morning, and she said she had a buyer that is just not motivated. Is Andrea on right now? Oh, good. We can talk about her. No, I'm just kidding. So this buyer is really just not super motivated. And it's okay, right? I mean, it's okay if they're not motivated. It's just that the greatest fear you have as an agent and working with a not motivated person is that they end up with a really horrible experience because they really didn't want to do it anyway. So tell them that, right? Tell them that. You just don't want to get used and abused, right? Like when you write offers that aren't competitive, then you just get used as bait. And you know what I mean? You just don't want to get used that way, right? Because all you really do is bait someone else up to write a better offer. So now instead of having 2 offers, they have 3. Or instead of having 3 offers, they have 4. Yours isn't even in contention, right? But what you're doing is you're helping the other people bid higher because now instead of being in competition with 1 person, they're in competition with 2. Or in competition with 2, they're in competition with 3. So, we've all been in those cases. We've all had listings where you're like, second place really is not a great offer. You've got the first one you're going with is a great offer and your second offer is like 7,000 less. And we've all had that. So it's just that some people, when they get in a competitive situation, don't want someone else to win. Okay. So let them know that they need to be prepared to win. If they don't want to win, then that's okay. Then they're usually just going to help someone else win. Number 2, be nice. Be nice. The clients, the co-listing agent, the assistant, whoever's answering the phone, the front desk person at the office, if you're an ass just trying to get a hold of the listing agent, you just have to know how bad that's hurting your clients. All of you know Jana, right? If someone's a jerk to Jana, you're going to hear about it when she calls, right? This agent was really bad, right? And there's no reason to be a jerk to Jana. There's no reason to be a jerk to Ronnie, like my assistant. She'll take most of the calls on an offer coming in. You're far great. Use that person to your benefit. And don't be demeaning and talk down to them. I can't tell you the condescending and arrogant agents that come after us for, they have offers on our listings and they're like, I need to talk to Jason. Like, I need to get this answer like right now. Like, Ronnie actually has the answer. Right. And then I have to end up calling the agent back and dealing with them. And then I have to call Ronnie, get the answer, and then call the agent back. Just be nice to the people that answer the phone. Be nice to the agents. Sometimes people will send nasty emails. Like, I left you a message and I haven't heard back. Like, I need an answer by 3 o'clock or else my clients are pulling the offer. Well, at 4 o'clock, like, my email to you after your nasty email is, I just got a hold of my sellers. They weren't able to respond. Would you still like to consider, would you still like the seller to consider your offer? Because you said in your voicemail and text message and email that you weren't going to do it after 3. Would you still like us to consider you or let your offer go? To which every single one of them to a person responds back, yes, consider our offer. Because it's an agent trying to play negotiator hardball to get their client, thinking that I actually give a shit. Like, my client, I'm here to help my client. And so you're threatening my client with, like, we must respond by 5. Like, agents that put deadlines, right? We're Minnesota. We don't have deadlines on our offers. When you invent deadlines to try and force people to respond by them, very seldom does that work. It doesn't work on experienced realtors. Experienced realtors will simply respond back and say, my client can't meet your deadline. Would you like us to consider it afterwards? And 99 out of 100 people will say yes. We just wanted you to respond by 3. Like, we know we submitted the offer at 2:15. Like, it's not reasonable sometimes. So be nice to people. Treat as if they deal with the offer. Relationships matter. Look the agents up on Facebook. Find out if you have mutual friends. If you can find any way to connect with the listing agent, the admin, if your sister is good friends with the, marketing person on the team or whatever, any connection you can use to strengthen your relationship with your offer and with that listing agent, the better. Right? If the buyer, is mutual friends with, an agent on that team, call in the favor. Like, anything you can do, right? Just find some sort of relationship. Relationships matter. When we're in multiple offers, I can tell you, we beat out agents left and right simply because we have a reputation that's really good with agents, and they know, like, we mean business and we go to closings. So agents, for the most part, would rather work with people that they know and trust if they can, if all else is equal, or even if it's not equal. If we have an offer that's a little bit less, I will let my clients know, like, I would much rather work with this person because they work with an awesome lender and they don't play games. I don't have problems with inspections, because we've all had agents where we've just gotten, stuck into a competitive situation where the house goes $2,000 over and then they have $5,000 worth of repairs on the inspection. Right? So they were really competitive to get the offer accepted. And then all of a sudden, when it was 2 weeks later and all the other competing offers are gone, now they've used that situation to put themselves in a huge negotiating thing for the inspection. And those agents usually have reputations that precede them. So reputation matters, relationships matter. Under relationships, over communicate. You got to use feedback. So use showing time and use feedback to your advantage. When you're submitting feedback, always put in there, if you're writing an offer, let them know. Look at this as your chance. This is your only legal chance to communicate with the seller. Right? You are communicating directly with the seller 95 out of 100 times. 5% of the agents are, like, not allowing feedback to go to the seller, but 95% of the time, agents are letting that feedback go directly to the seller. So use that to your advantage. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, your house is so beautiful. My buyers just loved it. We just want you to know that they just can't wait to call this their home. It's super close to their aunt and their cousin. And they were almost started crying when we were there, right? Write your own modified cry letter in your feedback, right? We wanted to let you know We're writing the offer right now as we speak on the side of the road, and we should have it in your agent's email within 30 minutes. Put that in the feedback, because I guarantee you, if you're having a trouble getting a hold of the listing agent, you probably were one of these agents submitting feedback like kind of interested, NA, and then you don't put any words in, right? Because you just think you're a big negotiator. And then you're like pissed the agent's not getting a hold of you because they're in like 4 closings and 2 other appointments. I guarantee when their seller calls them saying that they saw feedback that there's an offer coming in 30 minutes, you're getting the first call, right? So if you just help that seller get on your side, the fastest way to the listing agent is to have their seller call them, because they'll respond to their seller fast. Okay, so use that feedback to your advantage. Over communicate. If you send over an offer, send an offer, but let them know. Like, don't use deadlines, right? Just be really consistent in your communication. Send an email, send a text, leave a voicemail. Don't sound like it's the only transaction you've ever worked on. You know, there again, it's busy people want to get stuff done, but like people who work on their only deal of their whole life are really annoying to deal with. They just really are. So if you are working on your only deal, just don't act like it. Act like you've got 4 or 5 other deals today, because there's nothing worse than the agent that calls 3 times a day looking for feedback on their offer they submitted. You know what I mean? The first time they submitted it was at 11. I mean, it's 2:30. We want to be aggressive, but you know, let people respond. So be consistent, over communicate. Clients, let your clients know. Sometimes we'll have agents that, you know, will call back or email back right away. I emailed, I sent it in the feedback so the seller will get it directly. I also texted and I left a voicemail. So you let your clients know. Sometimes, you know, we've even had it where we've written offers and they literally accepted an offer 2 hours ago and they just haven't updated everyone. Prepare people for the horrible situations that happen. Then when it doesn't happen, they're okay. But if the first time you ever tell them that they could have a problem is like while it's happening, you become the problem, by the way. Because you and your lack of communication is the reason they lost the house. And that sometimes is what they'll think. That's someone with a question? All right. Over communicate. Okay, motivation. So ask buyers, you know, if this house went away, would it upset you? All right. If you lost this one, are you going to be okay with that? You go to the next slide, Loretta. Who needs to be on mute? For some odd reason, the older I get, the more curly it gets. All right. Someone's got a loud mouth. Is that Rob Brown?
Am I not muted? Sorry about that.
No, it's nice. You're nice and loud.
That's actually Mike Olson and Lynn going by my.
Oh, I knew that was Mike. I just didn't know how far away he was. I was wondering if he was in his office. Like, that's 2 hallways away. All right, multiple offers. So the offer itself. For the offer itself, give as much earnest money as possible. If possible, don't ask the buyers for closing costs. Right? Don't ask for personal property. Don't be asking for the lawnmower. Don't be asking for the deck furniture. Right? For all you know, the deck furniture is like, you know, $6,000 and you just want it thrown in. Or we had one time where the seller had just bought a $9,000 John Deere tractor. They just wanted it included. You know, $350,000 house, but I mean, they didn't know how much it was. They just saw a tractor in the garage, you know? So sometimes people just have no idea what it is. If you're in multiple offers, do not ask for anything they haven't already said they were leaving. Make it easy. You want to make the offer easy for the seller to take. Under the work order, so FHA or VA, put in 0, right? Most of the time, if you put in 100 or 200 or 300. when we put together offer summaries, if you're putting together offer summaries for your sellers, which on our multiple offers, Ronnie will put together offer summaries. So if we have 5 offers, let's say on a listing, we're going to hit the price, we're going to hit the closing, the closing date, how much down, who their lender is, who their agent is. Are they asking for anything special? Are there any work orders or closing costs? Right? So there's 6, 7, 8 different bullet points, which is going to summarize each offer. Don't have it be one extra stupid thing like $300 in work orders that makes your offer slightly worse than another offer. And we all know this because, again, if you've had a listing, you've all had 4 or 5 offers. There are many times when you've had 4 or 5 offers where you're looking at it saying, oh, these are both good. So you have to start splitting hairs because you got 2 or 3 good offers. Okay? Don't ask for work orders. I mean, again, if you put in $0 and the hand railing gets called, the seller can still fix it or negotiate that with you. Like, your offer doesn't mean it's going to go away because they ask for a handrail. Okay. Have the buyers include an inspection, but don't make it subject to the inspection. Right? So you can do the inspection. It just doesn't have to be subject to the inspection. The longer I do this, the more I realize how unimportant inspections are. Not in terms of they're not important, they're good for knowledge. But if I were to summarize the thousands of inspections I've been through, they could be summarized as around $2,000, right? $1,500 to $2,000 is the summary of the thousands of inspections I've been through. Sometimes they're $0, sometimes they're $3,000 or $4,000, but most of the time they're $1,500 to $2,000 on average, right? So in the end, if you're bidding against someone to buy a house, it's probably, if you found things wrong with the inspection, it's very likely that less than $2,000 would cover it. Easy way to just, again, as a buyer, doesn't mean you don't have to do an inspection. There are many people that don't even put an inspection in. They'll just forego an inspection to be competitive. You can decide if you think that that's a good idea for your buyer. I would still do the inspection, just tell them it's just for their knowledge, right? You just put in there that it's not subject to it. We are going to do an inspection. It's not subject to it, and it's just for the buyer's knowledge. Let the seller choose the closing date. If you lose in multiple offers, you're going to be letting someone else choose the closing date anyway, right? So if you just say in the offer, you put in an amendment or an addendum, the closing date was intentionally left blank, the seller can choose a closing date of their liking anytime in the next 90 days. By allowing them to choose the closing date, I've had so many sellers choose an offer. Offer A comes in at $300,000, offer B comes in at $301,000. You think, oh, just net dollars. Offer A has July 30th for a closing date, and offer, B that's $1,000 higher has August 7th or before. And they pick because they're like, oh, we'd just rather have it done with by the end of July, or we'd rather have more time, whatever the seller would like. You think, well, the $1,000 isn't always the most important thing. So let them choose the closing date, because it may, as a buyer, you may have like a preference. Yet if you're wanting to be competitive and you let them choose anytime in the next 90 days, they likely aren't going to want to close in 2 weeks, right? I mean, you probably can't get your mortgage done in 2 weeks anyway. But by letting them choose the date, you're increasing the odds of them selecting you. Okay? All right, question so far before we get to number 6.
Hey, I came in late, but I have a question regarding the inspection. I've kind of wondered about that too. So if they have an inspection, but it's not contingent upon it, then, and if they find something scary, they can't back out of the purchase, or?
That's correct.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
okay.
correct. And it's fairly unlikely anyway, right?
Yeah.
Houses that sell in multiple offers that have lots of people interested in them typically don't have tons of problems either.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like, only you can decide if you, again, your seller or buyer rather does not have to win. You just have to know that other people, this is the list that other agents are going to go through, whether they go through this, item by item, or if they just go through some of it. The people who don't lose in multiple offers again and again and again go through more of this up front. So you do not ever have to forego not doing an inspection. There are advantages to the seller for the buyer to do an inspection, because from a liability and a risk mitigation standpoint, the buyer is more aware of anything and everything. So there's less likelihood of them coming back after a closing. But I can tell you, having sold lots of houses and multiples on the seller side, when there is not an inspection or it is not subject to the results of the inspection, I will tell you 9 out of 10 sellers will pick that offer if it's the same as another one. And we're trying, I mean, this whole class and this whole hour is spent on, like, you want to find ways to win. Do you have to use all of these every time? No, but you should use some of them some of the time. The more you use more often will mean you'll get beat less. And go the next 6 months, it's super important that you don't get beat, because you don't have enough inventory to backfill any of this buyer demand. So what you're going to have happen in the next 6 months is half of your buyers that are going to get mad the next 6 months losing out in multiples are going to just stop looking altogether. So they're just not going to buy. And that's what happens when people lose out in offers and they don't feel like there's an advantage for them doing it. They get frustrated and don't buy at all, or they don't list their house, or they just don't move forward. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Help them be creative to win. So in helping them be creative, so ask them if they have any relatives. Do they have anyone that could help them pay cash for the property? If they're in the under 250 range and, they've written 5 offers and they've written good offers. Like, I mean, we've all had that client where it's like, you've gone 15,000 or 17,000 over asking price, but you're, 5% down conventional and you have to ask for closing costs or whatever. So net dollars, you're just not high enough, or you're net not good enough in order to win. Can they borrow money from their 401k? Can they borrow money from a relative? Can they pay cash? Can grandma pay cash for it and they get a mortgage 2 weeks after closing, right? They're good for it. They can buy the house. They can finance it. It's just that if they had a cash offer, they would be so much more competitive. Not everyone is in this position, but you'll be surprised how many people have a grandparent or a parent that would be willing to have their kid not have to be 25,000 over asking price because they're going FHA, when all they would have to do to help them save 17, 18, 19,000 is borrow them the money for 30 days. Many people have family members or friends or whatever that have that kind of money that could literally make the difference between you writing 7 offers and writing 1. So ask them. Sometimes at a bare minimum, they can just borrow the money for closing costs. Right, so now you don't have to write it in that they are getting seller paid closing costs. Ask your lender about premium pricing the rate. I don't have this on the creative part, but you can basically, you can get the premium pricing on a rate. So say rates are 3%, maybe they pay 3.3, and then that includes some of the closing costs, or 3.5, and that includes some of the closing costs. So the amount of money they need goes down. The second part of being creative, have them write a cry letter. I know this is controversial. I don't even know if are they still legal? Are they illegal now? They say they're illegal. They say they're going to get rid of them. They haven't yet, right?
I think Mike Olson might mention, like, if you're representing the seller, not to look at them, but if you are representing a buyer, go ahead.
Yeah.
Then it's their choice to kind of cross that line, I suppose.
Yeah. It's they're important. They really are important. I've had so many sellers, choose offers that were just inferior because they like the people.
Yeah.
you know, and it's their choice. You know, our job is just to help them make the best possible choice. Our job isn't to choose the offer for them. It's just to, you know, help them be educated and make the best decision for them. I will tell you that when they're truthful, because we all know that some people embellish or, you know, write a cry letter that's intended just to be that, and it's, you know, not necessarily 100% true, or it's embellished or whatever. There are many times though where the people want the house so damn bad that, I mean, I would take that client over. I mean, the one thing that you will never be able to invent is desire. And when someone wants something bad enough, especially when we're in a challenging economy and market like we're in right now, that person that loses their job that wants your house really, really bad will figure out how to buy it, right? They'll figure out how they can borrow money from their 401k, or they can, you know, get a second mortgage on their cabin or whatever. They'll make things still happen that otherwise people who aren't as motivated or aren't as attached to it will just walk away from. We've had a couple of cancellations in the last couple of weeks, and, you know, they were just people that weren't as invested in making sure that the thing went through. So desire is a big thing. So writing the cry letter can be really important to the seller because it lets them know why it's important to them. Asking the lender to contact the listing agent. If I get 10, you know, offers or 5 offers, let's say, on a house, I bet you I only ever get one lender that will ever contact me. Maybe 20%. If your lender is not calling when you're competitive offers and it's your lender needs to call the listing agent and let them know these people are awesome. They are totally fine. They've got super stable and awesome employment. And I don't have any concerns. Right? Your lender needs to vouch for the people without being asked for it. That's a huge thing. That's a huge thing. Because when I have lenders proactively trying to help their buyers get houses, I know that these people they're vetted, right? I mean, like, it's not like the guy's, you know, answering the questions because we called. This person's like, hey, these people are solid. I've worked with them. They've got stable employment. Like, I have no concerns on their file. Because if we call lenders, that's what we're going to ask them, right? How stable is their employment? And do you have any concerns on their file? A good lender, if you're on the listing side here, we'll get to that in a minute. If you're on the listing side and you're calling lenders, the only thing you're searching for is for them to stammer when you ask that question. Do you have any concerns on the file? Be quiet. When they start like stammering at all, you know they have some sort of an issue. They should tell you they can't disclose that. In which case, then you can call the buyer's agent and say, the lender seemed like he had concerns. So we're going to need to have you vet those out, because we would need to know that they don't have any concerns whatsoever with regards to financing. Most of the things we have that create financing issues, if we called the list or the lender, when we choose an offer, if you're a listing agent and you're not calling the lender to verify that their employment is stable, to verify that they don't have any concerns with regards to an approval letter, if you take approval letters at just the paper they're written on, this will be a really fun 90 days for you, because you're going to learn that those things are really not a lot better than toilet paper. So if you think approval letters are worth anything, then you just haven't been through any sort of a correction. This is where lenders that don't know what the hell they're doing are going to find out what they need to be doing. So 4 weeks ago, to get an FHA mortgage, you needed a 620 credit score. 12 days ago, to get an FHA mortgage, it had to be 660. 3 days ago, to get an FHA mortgage, it has to be 640. Now, the last time the mortgage guy that's working with your client in question, or this, you know, buyer on a house that you have listed, may have been 17, 18, 20 days ago. They don't even know that the FHA changed the credit score requirements 3 times in 20 something days. And that's a huge deal, right? Because a buyer may end up having a 645 credit score and literally one little hiccup on his credit and you don't have a closing based on today's rate. So just, again, things that you need to question. You want your lender reaching out to the listing agent as much as possible so that they can vouch for them. All right, next slide. Okay, was this the last one? Oh, there's one more after this. Okay. All right, escalation clause. So if we have multiple offers every single month. 50% of the time, if someone writes an escalation clause, if you don't know what an escalation clause, well, okay, I can't see everyone on here. Who does not know what an escalation clause? Do we need to explain escalation clause? Anyone? Any new agents? Raise your hand or something. I can't see.
I think you should, Jason.
Some of your faces. Okay, I'm gonna go through it a little bit. So, escalation clause. So an escalation clause is I'm gonna leave the blank. I'm gonna leave the purchase price blank on the offer. I'm gonna do a separate addendum, and I'm gonna have this language here under. You guys can see this spot in here. Buyer will pay X amount of dollars. So buyer will pay $1,000 over the highest bid, not to exceed. Okay, let's just say the house is listed at $300,000. The buyer will pay $1,000 over the highest bid, not to exceed $310,000. That's an escalation clause. Written confirmation of the highest bid to be provided to the buyer or buyer's agent by the listing agent. Okay, with an escalation clause, don't ever, 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 under any circumstances, submit an escalation clause offer without verifying with the listing agent that they're comfortable with an escalation clause. Okay? Do not unilaterally think that escalation clauses are good, right? That will be helpful, because if you represent the seller, I will tell you that they can be bad. Right? If you represent the seller and you're a listing agent, you may not want to look at escalation clauses, right? Because it allows a buyer to get a house for less money than they would be ordinarily willing to pay, right? Because in that case that we just said, they were paying $1,000 higher than the highest offer, not to exceed $310. My backup offer is $303. So now they're going to get it for $304, which is $6,000 under where they would have probably put their offer if they actually would have selected to go with a straight offer instead of an escalation clause.
Hey, Jason,
Yeah, go ahead.
do you ever find your sellers think that that's kind of a game the buyer's playing and just not even consider that offer?
Exactly, that's why they're touchy, right? Some people believe that an escalation clause is unilaterally good, right? That you're going to drive up the price. It could be good. It's good for your buyer because they only have to pay a certain amount of dollars over someone else. If you get 3 escalation clauses, okay, play this out. You got 5 offers on your listing. 3 of them are escalation clauses. Now what are you going to do? The one offer's contingent, and the fifth or the fourth offer, which is the only one that has a price, is not acceptable. The other ones are all escalation clauses. So now what the hell do you do? Because one's contingent, which you wouldn't accept at all. The one and only one that has an actual price, which you could consider, isn't a number that you would consider. And those 3 that are all, escalation clauses, what are you going to do? As a listing agent, what do you do in that case? What we do, if I had 3 escalation clauses, I'd call all back and I would let them know we would go ahead and want your highest and best. We're not looking at escalation clauses. We got too many escalation clauses. You have 1 chance to submit your highest number. We'll choose by 5. So we give them 1 redo without escalation clauses. Half of the time on multiple offers, I get escalation clauses where the people didn't ask for permission to send it. You need to make sure that the listing agent is comfortable with an escalation clause. You got to understand 50% of the time you're dealing with agents that don't even know what they are and how to actually negotiate with them. So escalation clauses used to work really good when there were very few of us that were doing them. They work less good now simply because many times you'll have, multiple escalation clauses, and then it's like, well, how the hell do you compete with those? So on ours, if we write an escalation clause, we write highest and best, written confirmation. That's also the same addendum where we say that the seller can choose their closing date of their liking, right? So they can choose the closing date of their choice. If the agent says no, right? So no, I'm not comfortable with it, then do not write an escalation clause. And to Rob's point, I mean, we're only talking about the listing agent. We have no idea what the seller will think, but there are many sellers that will feel like it's a game, like these people went ahead and made me an offer, and these people just tried to play a game to try and get it a little bit higher. Now, that's not going to be super common. It's more common that the seller will just look at the highest possible price and want that one, right? That's just human nature. I mean, obviously, sometimes it'll come down to cry letter. Sometimes it'll come down to convenience. Sometimes it comes down to closing date. All of these things combined will create your best possible chance to win over that seller. Because if you create an offer that is the best price, has the highest dollar amount, it has the least amount of inconveniences, it's not asking for work orders, it's not subject to an inspection, it has $10,000 earnest money, it has a great lender who contacted the listing agent, right? You're not asking for the riding lawnmower and grandma's hutch. I mean, just dumb things that kind of set people aside. If you do all this stuff, you'll have very few multiple offers that you will lose in. And the most common step that gets missed is an initial buyer consultation where you explain to them the process of multiple offers before they ever get into them. Because I think that the biggest stumbling block that you have is when you write the first shitty offer with a buyer, and then that's the way they learn. They learn by asking for $5,000 or $12,000 in closing costs. They write an offer that's contingent upon a home sale and closing costs and a home inspection and $500 worth of work orders, and they have an eloan.com approval letter that's not really 100% done, and they're in multiples.
Jason, can I ask you a couple questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
So at one of our team meetings, Mike said that they don't want, the Commerce Department didn't want to see the cry letters anymore. Are you still doing those?
Well, so I brought that up more of as a question. So if we represent buyers, yes, we do.
Okay.
Two things. I have them write the cry letter, which, and we don't call it a cry. In fact, in this case, where was that page, Louetta? We changed it. We don't call it a cry letter anymore. It's just a letter to the seller. I think it's almost more important to write in the feedback when you submit feedback to the seller, to the agent, put in there the top 2 or 3 things, like the buyer, just from the moment they walked in, they just felt like your home was home. It's 2 blocks away from their aunt. It's super close to his work. And they can't even believe that a house so perfect came about.
Okay. Well, I know he said right about the house and not so much about, the people and stuff. And then my other question was, so, Brad and Mike both say that they don't like the escalation clauses. They don't think they're fair, which I get. I just had a situation. There were 7 offers on a property, and my buyer, the house was listed at $290. We offered $305, and apparently I think somebody else must have offered similar to that. So they came back, and I had written in there, if the house doesn't appraise, buyer and seller to agree to renegotiate. So they came back and said, well, she paid the difference from whatever the appraisal is up to $300, and then the seller would pay the difference of $300 to $305. Well, on the when I did a market analysis on the property, and taxes and RPR and all that kind of stuff, one assessment was $238, one was $264. I mean, they were way low, even though this house was adorable.
Yeah.
So my buyer did not feel comfortable because it could have been a 30,000 spread or something she didn't have. What would you do in that situation of, advising them when they come back with that they don't want to renegotiate, they want the buyer to make up the difference? Is there any smart play?
There really isn't. So when I'm representing a buyer, I usually let the buyer know that the appraisal really is not about substantiating it's not about determining the value. It's about substantiating value. So appraisers, like if you were willing to pay $300,000, I will say that your opinion as a buyer is far more valid than the opinion of the appraiser. And the reason it's more valid is because you're in the market right now. Okay. You're in the market, you're looking at all the different criteria that you're looking for. And this is the best property that you can find for what you're looking for. And this is the price you were willing to pay for it. And the reason that it's more accurate is because it's real time. Now, the appraiser's job is to go backwards in time and find other properties that are identical to it, which can sometimes be a challenge simply by its proximity to other properties that are exactly the same. Right? So, you just sometimes are in a snapshot in time where you can't find 3 comps that are identical, that are within 3 miles, in the same area. So, and you work in a market where that would be common, Chris, right? In Hudson, if you get to North Hudson, let's say on 5 acres at 400,000 or 500,000, sometimes you just don't have that many comps because there aren't that many houses in that general area. And
Right.
so, sometimes it's one of those things where an appraiser's job, appraisers are more mitigating risk against buyers, right? So if a buyer has a 620 credit score and 5% down, that appraiser is going to need to be a lot harder on the house because of that loan than if your buyer has an 820 credit score and 30% down. That same lender may have far different requirements for the appraiser based upon their risk tolerance from 5% to 30% down.
Okay.
So appraisers aren't going out there independently only looking at houses without any sort of, justification against who they're borrowing the money to. So when an appraiser gets hired, they're getting hired based upon that lender's risk tolerance, and that lender's risk tolerance is based against that buyer. So, appraisals being low is sometimes that's more an indicator of the buyer's risk tolerance than it is the property value. Because you've seen values on Zillow. You could have 2 different realtors do two different market analysis on a property and come in $10,000 apart. Like, you both do the same thing and are maybe both very capable, but just have a different number in terms of like your opinion of value. And a buyer and an appraisal is just that. It's far more meaningful, let's say, because sometimes you can't borrow the damn money on the house because of it. So an appraisal can become a real stumbling block. But that's where many times when an appraiser comes in exactly at purchase price, which happens very often, their job is not to determine the damn value. It's only to substantiate that the value that's already been determined between the buyer and the seller was acceptable based upon their risk tolerance.
Okay.
Jason, we have 3 minutes left and we have 2 slides. One is
Okay.
about the appraisals. So this next one is on the sellers side.
All right. So on offers when you're representing a seller. So sometimes on multiple offers when you're representing a seller, if you get a crappy offer, like you have a $400,000 house and you get a $350 offer, you've been on the market for a week, let the seller know. Like, don't reject offers, right? Sometimes troll that sucker around for a few days. Like, that's the benefit of, like, in Wisconsin, they have a deadline, right? So, the offer has a certain date and then the dang thing goes away in a few days, whatever they write down. In Minnesota, they don't. So if someone writes an offer at, 50,000 low, send out an email, change it in the MLS, make sure that the people that are setting up showings today know the seller had an offer on the table. We've still been in counter. Everything is, everything is still available. We will update you if anything changes. But don't reject them. Many, many times you can use offers that are low or not acceptable as bait. Sellers get emotional and many times will want to respond to a low offer with just a flat out rejection. And sometimes if you just don't respond for a day, Maybe, you know, after you've had it for 24 hours, you respond and say, you know what, it's a lot lower than they want. They've had a few other showings. I haven't been able to get them to commit to making a counter offer at this point. Right? Don't just send over a flat out rejection. Sometimes I can't tell you how many houses I've sold because we've just had lingering offers. Right? And all of a sudden you can drag that sucker into multiples after like 3, 4, 5 days on the market. You have one low offer and that can turn into a couple offers, because sometimes just the fact that someone has an offer on the table might create more interest. Just happened for us this weekend. And then with the leftover offer, because it was in a new construction complex I took the leftover offer, the non-winning offer, and I sold them the one next door. So even if it's low, the longer you keep it for negotiation, it can be better. Many times the buyers would become more interested if there's another offer. Offers can be a delicate situation. So when representing a seller, be cognizant of the fact that you don't be so opinionated. This is a hard one for me, by the way. Talking more to this part of the class is for me. Don't be so opinionated on the value, the offers, and things like that. The way that you deal with that first offer or two on a seller's situation can sometimes really screw up your relationship with them. So let me give you an example. You got a $400,000 listing. You wanted to take it at $375,000. You told them that right away. You listed at $400,000. You use this as a billy club, right? Because this offer came in at $365,000. You use it as a billy club to let them know we need to get the price down. We need to get the price down. We need to get the price down. Yeah, they know you need to get it. Let the offer just speak for itself. Don't be in there telling them they're dumb. They overpriced their house. You see, this is just remember that they need to learn on their own. And if it's their idea, they will feel way better about it than if it's your idea. They remember what you said. Like most of them have not forgotten, right? But don't use the offer as like a weapon because you feel vindicated because, well, we finally got an offer. We sold a house not long ago for way over where we thought that was going to end up. There just weren't a lot of comps, and we went a little bit high because the seller thought that we should. And we ended up selling it. And I mean, lo and behold, we ended up netting them a lot more money. And we kept thinking, oh, we might have an appraisal issue. We might not be able to sell it at that price. And we did. So let the seller be in charge. Always want to educate them, but just in a lot of cases, offers can be delicate. So you're better to not be so judgmental about how they want to respond. I've lost clients over the years where you get too opinionated on the way things needed to be. And then like literally a month later, you sell the damn thing with your next offer for basically what the seller wanted or a little bit more than what you suggested. And then, like I say, you will never get a referral or another client out of that because of how they felt like you just were. And you just didn't really work for them. So that's it. The last part was appraisals, and we did cover a lot of that. Do you want to flip to that slide? If you're representing the buyer, ask if there's any way to pay the difference. Ask the buyer if they can pay the difference, right? Ask the sellers to come down in price. I mean, that's really your only two options if the appraisal comes in low. If you're asking the seller, don't come down in price if you can help it. The appraiser's opinion is just a value. It's just an opinion. The buyer thought it was worth it when they priced what they offered. So appraisals, right? And most of the time, you're going to end up somewhere in the middle, or sometimes you'll end up somewhere in the middle. I've had buyers that have come up with all of the difference, and I've had sellers that have had to pay all of the difference, right? And then sometimes you're just right in the middle negotiating it out. So it depends on the property. Houses that are getting 5 and 10 offers are certainly having, the sellers are more often going to go with a 25 or a 20% down or a cash offer simply because of the lack of appraisal issues, or certainly not the volume of appraisal issues that you have on, say, 3.5% down FHA or 5% down conventional. questions about all this?
I guess I have a quick question about, yeah, because I just had an appraisal come in low, and I mean, I think the buyer, there was an escalation clause involved and the buyers did go way above list. So I'm just wondering kind of like who should, you know, so it comes in low and who should really initiate, like, okay, you know, should we propose to split the difference, or, you know, do you like,
Well, the buyer has to initiate it because it's the buyer's problem, right? The buyer
Okay.
needs it to appraise, right? So here's the thing. If it's cash, it doesn't need an appraisal.
right?
So it always has to be initiated by the buyer because it isn't the seller's problem that it came in low. It's the buyer's problem. So the
Okay.
buyer needs to address what they want done because the appraisal coming in low is a problem that the buyer has with the bank,
Mhm.
right? Like, so as a seller's agent, now the minute the buyer becomes aware of it and tells the seller, now it becomes a seller's problem. So it doesn't mean that it's like always going to stay the buyer's problem. Is like as soon as they tell the seller about it, my inability to come up with the extra 7,000, like if I represent a buyer, the easiest way to negotiate the best would be to say, we love your house so much. Like we'd literally try to pay any price for it, but we can't come up with any more money. So if I represent a buyer, I would never say, hey, the appraisal came in low, we're going to need you to come down. We're just like, the appraisal came in low. Like, we would be willing to pay for it, but we've called our relatives. We called my grandma. We tried to find the money anywhere and we just can't. We scrounged everything together and we sold the kayak on Craigslist. So now we come up with $2,600 is all we could get this weekend. If I represent a buyer, that's how I'm going to come at you.
Mhm.
Because now I at least I have a seller who will know that I did everything I could, and now you're going to be emotional to the plight of like, it didn't come in and I did what I could. I tried to ask everyone for money and I just don't have any more, but I really want to buy your house. And then the seller's going to come back and the seller's going to say, yeah, I looked around and I hit the couch cushions and I tried to find the money. I can come down $3,200, but without the extra money, I'm not able to move on and be able to move on with my life the way that we had originally planned. And so all I can do is come down 3,200. Well, okay, now we got a gap of 10 or a gap of 6 or whatever. Now, again, as a seller, then you bridge that back and say, okay, we've got this gap. Now what do we do with it? It's, you know where they go. We're going to go ahead and need you, Carrie, you got to cut your commission. We had one of those this month. And we ended up giving them a couple little scrapes, but not much, but just to make the deal happen, because it was one of those where the buyer had given, the seller had give, actually the buyer and seller, and then the buyer and seller of the houses that on the other side. So there was 4 transactions trying to keep the one together, because obviously they were all going to tumble. But again, so sometimes they can get tricky. But nonetheless, it starts with the buyer. And, sometimes if you represent the buyer and you say that initial thing that we talked about, hey, I got, I did everything I could to come up with the money. I can't come up with it. And the seller says, well, sorry, I have a backup offer that's been here, and I'm going to take my risk with them. They're whatever, 20% down, whatever. If it's FHA to FHA, you got the same damn appraisal. But sometimes you have an FHA offer, and then in the meantime, you may have gotten a backup offer in the meantime that's better. Each situation is different, but appraisals obviously, can create fun calls.
Well, I got lucky because both sides agreed to just split the difference, and it was easy.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes that's the way it ends up. Sometimes the buyer eats the whole thing. Sometimes the seller eats the whole thing, and sometimes the whole deal falls apart.
Yeah.
That's the one you hope doesn't happen.
Yeah.
All right. Hope this was helpful. Any other questions that you guys have right now? Any last?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Happy day.
Yeah.
Make it a good
Thank
day.
you.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.